Thanks, Frank. On behalf of my son Tyrell, we'd like to introduce the Ohio State Representative Nancy Garland, who's going to be speaking on behalf of U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, our Senate candidate in Ohio.
Well, may I say that I am very excited to be here today, and I want to thank the sponsors of this historic disability forum. I know I actually have worked for some of the sponsors at this particular time, but I am here on behalf of Senator Sherrod Brown. I was going to say wishes he could be here, but I understand he has worked very, very, very hard, staff, so he will be here for like 5 minutes later on. But I'm here to let you know in terms of the things that he believes in regard to disability. And knowing my commitment and work on disability issues and having a daughter who is severely hearing impaired, Senator Brown has asked me to represent him at this important event. Now, I've known Senator Brown since he was in the House of Representatives. In his first term, I actually worked with him on health care legislation. I have continued to work with him both at the state and the federal level, and there is no one that is more dedicated to disability issues. I'm also honored to share the podium today with Edward Kennedy Jr., with Representative McMorris Rodgers, and Secretary Mandel. Senator Brown is known to be a public servant to the core. He believes that all Americans have the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he believes his job is to facilitate that pursuit. He knows that America is strongest when all people are free to pursue their God-given rights. And central to these rights, I think, are 3 tenets. Health, which means support for accessible and affordable health care, which means we need to protect Medicaid and Medicare. Education, the key to freedom, which means that we have high expectations and welcoming environments for students with disabilities. And third, economic security. The promise of America, the land of opportunity, is for all, which means increasing employment among people with disabilities. Now, Senator Brown's mission is to help all Americans attaining the American dream. And by all Americans, he means all children and adults with disabilities. So how do we do that? Medicaid. It is the safety net for people with disabilities and must be preserved. Since 1965, Medicaid has been an essential program for people with disabilities, providing health care services for low-income Americans, including seniors, pregnant women, people with disabilities, and children. 68 million Americans currently receive care through Medicaid. Senator Brown has found and will continue to fight to protect and strengthen Medicaid. Congressman Ryan's budget in the House of Representatives has recommended a block grant for Medicaid, which would merely shift the cost of health care more heavily to the states, localities, beneficiaries, and providers. And as a state legislator, something that I know the states and providers and localities cannot ill afford at this particular time. Those hardest hit by cuts to Medicaid would be senior citizens and individuals with disabilities, who account for 2/3 of Medicaid spending, but are only a fraction of those participating in this essential program. Senator Brown joined 20 other senators or his colleagues in the Senate opposing Senator or Congressman Ryan's offers to his budget to block grant Medicaid. Senator Brown is committed to supporting this vital program and at the same time is committed to reforming it. He is determined to pursue the basic promise of the American with Disabilities Act by enacting policy changes that will result in more choice for beneficiaries and service options delivered in the least restrictive environment. Medicaid currently has an intentional bias that takes away people's ability to choose where they want to live, and it requires states to pay for care in a nursing home, but merely gives an option to receive care in the community, even though most people would prefer to receive care in the community. Though a number of incentives have been provided for the Medicaid program to help people with disabilities live as independently as possible, this bias toward nursing home care remains, though I would say that we in Ohio are certainly making efforts to move towards having more community living. Senator Brown will actively seek out solutions that make Medicaid more responsive to the preferences of beneficiaries and the need for full community integration with such things as self-directed waiver. Next, the Affordable Care Act. I think maybe you heard about it. Obama, they like to call it Obamacare, or I like to call it Obamacares, has been attacked, unfortunately, by some people on the other side. Senator Brown views the Affordable Care Act as one of the most important accomplishments in this generation. The ACA will make health insurance more affordable, comprehensive, and secure for millions of American families. For Americans with disabilities and their families, health care reform means never running into a lifetime cap. It also means that no one will be denied coverage on the private market because of pre-existing conditions. Quite a step forward. Since March 2010, no family could lose insurance coverage because a child had a pre-existing condition. Since 2010, the annual and lifetime limits on coverage have increased each year, and they will fully disappear by 2014. Now, a baby with a birth defect or a child with a disability won't run out of coverage in the middle of the year or before the child is grown. Next, we need to have high expectations and welcoming learning environments for students with disability. Before IDEA was passed in 1975, about 1 million children with disabilities did not attend school. And as I was researching for this, my daughter was born in 1974. And if it hadn't been for IDEA, she wouldn't be where she is now, a very successful attorney. And she's severely hearing impaired. So thank you, IDEA. Now, IDEA ensures that every child, regardless of disability status, has access to a free and appropriate public education. And as a result, nearly 7 million individuals with disabilities today, ranging from infants to age 21, have a federally protected right to receive an education in the least restrictive environment. Senator Brown also feels that we need to have full funding for IDEA, which has never been fully funded since the past, He has been the co-sponsor of the full funding for IDEA Now Act and Keep Our Pact Act, that's hard to say, that would ensure full funding of IDEA, something I know I worked on when I was in Washington, and I've certainly worked on it when I've been here in Ohio. Senator Brown understands that conditions must be right for optimal learning. That is why he was an original co-sponsor of the Safe Schools Improvement Act, which fights bullying and harassment of students because of an actual or perceived difference as race or disability. I particularly applaud him because I am the sponsor of the anti-bullying legislation here in Ohio, and I know I talk to parents almost every day that fight this issue, so we need to continue to fight on. Senator Brown also understands that an enriched and safe early environment is crucial to optimal development and has co-sponsored the Foundations for Success Act, which would increase access to high-quality child care and early education programs and ensure that children with special needs who are in child care receive the services they need. He's also introduced the Ready Schools Act, which would require schools that have a high proportion of at-risk children to track how they are doing in terms of providing educational offerings that appropriately support students and their families. It also emphasizes professional development for school staff in the development and learning of young children and developmentally appropriate educational practices. Senator Brown is also a very proud and passionate member of the a public member of the voting trustees for Gallaudet University Board of Trustees, which is obviously the leader in education for the hearing impaired and deaf in Washington. And again, I thank him for what he's done in that regard. Now last, people with disabilities deserve employment and economic security. No doubt about that. Senator Brown has long supported and is co-sponsor of the ABLE Act, or Achieving a Better Life Experience Act, that would allow individuals to establish tax-exempt accounts for family members with disabilities. Their accounts could be used to pay for expenses such as education, housing, transportation, employment support, and medical care. Individual taxpayers would be allowed to a tax deduction of up to $2,000 per year for contribution to the ABLE account. Also, Senator Brown has worked closely with Senators Harkin and Kennedy and others to ensure access to meaningful employment for people with disabilities. The ADA is now 22 years old, and over those 22 years, too little headway has been made in employment for people with disabilities. Only about 32% of the working adults with disabilities are in the labor force. Senator Brown looks forward to working in the coming Congress to finally turn a corner and bring more people into the labor force. Social Security, I'm talking about security. For 75 years, Social Security has kept millions of senior citizens, individuals with disabilities, and children out of poverty. Social Security is not only a retirement program, as it also serves as a disability insurance program for American workers who become permanently disabled and unable to work. Over 8 million Americans with disabilities receive Social Security disability benefits. Senator Brown remains a staunch advocate for the Social Security disability insurance and SSI, two essential federal programs that provide insurance to individuals who are able to work or unable to work because of illness or disability. And lastly, the American Disabilities Act was intended to cover all aspects of life. And in 2008, Senator Brown actually co-sponsored amendments to the ADA to reinstate original protection in case law that has eroded over the years, and he will continue to try to get the ADA back to where it was when it was passed 22 years ago. I know it's been a difficult road in that way. We haven't liked always what the Supreme Court's ruled. In 1993, Senator Brown was an original sponsor to the Motor Voter Act, which made it easier for persons with disabilities to register to vote. And if you've watched in the papers here in Ohio and across the nation, unfortunately, there are efforts being made to try to limit the ability of some people to vote. So again, Senator Brown, and I will tell you, I will continue to work to make sure that that doesn't happen. And one last thing, Senator Brown wanted to let me let you know that he supports the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. It has been ratified by 116 countries, and Senator Brown is very hopeful that it will actually be passed in the lame duck because it has a lot of bipartisan support. And Senator Brown feels that fighting for the rights of all people should not be a partisan issue. and he will continue to work, when elected, to help all Americans, including disabled Americans, to live life to their fullest potential. Thank you.